Today is Easter Sunday, and it's a very high holy day for many, many across the world. And so there are a lot of people today that are centering this day on one man, Jesus, that Christed being that was here at that time. And in New Thought, we have a great deal of reverence for Jesus, and we don't adhere to a lot of the beliefs and teachings that a lot of the religions do. But for example, we don't believe in sin, in original sin. We believe in original blessing. That we are all divine the moment we're born, and there's nothing to save us from. But there are a lot of things that are to be gained from knowing about Jesus. Now, normally on this holiday, there's a lot of focus on him, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if we took a look at the community that he was raised in on this particular day? It's a very, very important part of the story that I don't think we hear often, that we don't know about. But he was raised in a community to do the things that he did. It wasn't like he was just living amongst everyone and all of a sudden out pops this guy that can do miracles. No, there was a particular community he was raised in. It was called the Essenes, and they were uh, uh, first of all, they were very centered around a purpose, and their purpose was spiritual enlightenment. It was spiritual enlightenment, not only for themselves, but also for all of humanity. They they were here to do that. They knew that, and they centered their entire life around it. They had practices to develop their ability to hold high spiritual vibrations. And because of these practices and how they understood the presence, that universal field, that divine intelligence, how they understood all of that, they had a high degree of love within the community as well. And they vibrated with this love. It wasn't something they just thought. So they were interested in life not only spiritually, on a non physical basis, but they were also very interested in the physical because they understood that in order to reach these higher levels of consciousness, these higher realms, that the body had to be able to hold the higher vibrations associated with those realms. Otherwise, you might pop up there, but then you'd lose it. Like we do sometimes when we have a very high experience, and then we go back. Well, the body has to be prepared, and on an energetic level, it has to be able to hold those high vibrations and maintain them. And they knew that. And the thing about them was they didn't think that they were a body that was trying to get more spiritual, like I think a lot of us have believed in our lifetimes. They knew that they started out as spirit, that they started out as the unified field. They started out as this energetic presence, and that this presence is what came together and coalesced into forming a body. And so they knew that their purpose here was to transmute any belief that would hinder them from recognizing the reality of who they were. And they had a true commitment to God, to all of humanity. They were very devoted, and their community showed that. Now, at the time, many of the religious leaders, they would like to go on the corners and they'd pray. And, on a corner, people could see you from this direction and from that direction too, right? So they got maximum exposure by going to the corner to pray. And they did other things. They made sure they ate the right things and wore the right things and said the right things, and they didn't work on the Sabbath. These were all kind of outer representations of the rules and the laws that some of their beliefs had been reduced to. But the Essenes, Jesus' community, they were very different from that. They didn't go on the corners to pray. They didn't even go on the streets to pray. They didn't even be in the cities at all. They usually separated themselves. They would go outside and live outside of a city in their own communities. And the purpose for this was so that they could devote their lives to their practices, so that they wouldn't have a lot of outer distraction that pulled them from what they knew was very important to them. Um, they uh, they did have these practices of enlightenment. Unlike the typical Jews of the day, they didn't make animal sacrifices. In fact, they didn't even eat meat at all. They had a practice of bathing every morning and getting in water. Water was important to them, um, and these practices were not, oh, I think I'll be healthier if I just don't eat meat for a while. It wasn't like that. It was that they understood certain substances, certain practices were going to be beneficial for the body to be able to hold high levels of energy. And that's why they did them. And because of this, because of the purification of their bodies, the way that they lived that way, and plus because of all the practices that they did, they were able to do what might seem like miraculous things. We've all heard of Jesus's miracles where he turned water into wine, where he fed a multitude with just a little bit of food to start with, raising people from the dead. It wasn't like he just thought hard about these things. He had been trained and done practices to enable him to work with the energy, which is the divine, which everything is made up of, which we're even made up of. He was just aware of it and practiced with it to such a great degree that he did a lot more things than we can do. Now, in this community, they they really loved each other and they loved to be together and they loved to be in community. They shared things among them all. They ate together. They worked together. They raised their children together. And there was an equality present. In that time, men were seen as the ones that were could be the spiritual dudes, could be the ones that were higher up and women just had to follow. But in the Essene community, that was not the case. Women were on an equal par with men. There were women that were high level teachers of spiritual knowings and practices. So that was present. The training of the children, the females and the males both did that. So when we're talking about that then it would be obvious then, since the children, both the males and females, were taught, that Mary Magdalene had received the same instruction that Jesus had received. So she also was on a par level with him in terms of her ability to deal with energy, her ability to do the ascension and descension practices. So these things, they shared a foundation. And this is what makes for a very, very strong community. The foundation was their commitment to expressing the divine, their commitment to to doing that, and having their entire community devoted to that. That was their primary thing that they did. Their daily functions were all about it. And so this also meant that there was a lot of agreement among them. They saw very little cause for disagreement. They and if someone had a charge about something, well, they knew that they had their own energy practices to deal with it. With their children, their focus was on teaching children the ways of enlightenment, the ways of ascension, descension. And so that's what the children went to school for. Of course, they learned things from the scriptures, the Old Hebrew Bible, but in addition, they had other sources from other places. They brought in people from other areas that knew things about spirituality. They weren't necessarily Jewish. People came from India, for example, to teach them. And then they also sent their children to other places to learn practices and processes that would help them. For example, they were sent to Egypt to do work in some of the huge structures there. So there was just a holistic focus on the mind and the body and the breath or spirit. And these were the primary instructions for their children. Well, that's very different from today, isn't it? Where, we send our children to school, but what we're really hoping is that they learn enough so that they can get a good job and make a good living, right? So that's really more about survival. We're teaching our kids, spending all this time teaching our kids to survive. And then if they're lucky, they may get an hour of instruction on Sunday morning about things spiritual. That happens with a lot of people. Some children don't even get that much. But so it's quite a contrast. Their entire community, their blessed community, was all about enlightenment. They, now at the particular time of Jesus, they had even upped their practices even further because they knew that they had to be at an even higher level to birth him and, in addition, to bring him up. So there were um, practices that were even more difficult to do, and those that were going to be with Jesus, those who were birthing him, and those that were going to be around him with him, his wife to be, they were all involved in those higher practices as well because they knew what was coming. And so this is the environment that he was raised in, devoted, love filled, focused on energy practices. And one of his primary practices was the power and the presence and the feeling and the vibration of love. Love. He practiced it over and over and over. He practiced it so much, and each of us can do that in our own way, just going into our heart, feeling the presence of love, and sitting with that for long periods of time. You could start with, 5 minutes and then increase to 10 and 15. But just that vibration of love is like it's one of the highest vibrations on the planet, perhaps as high as we can get here in the physical. And so he did that practice over and over and over. It became a way of being for him. It wasn't that he had to think about it anymore. He simply was the presence of love. So it was imperative that the community supported him in these ways of enlightenment and embodiment because they knew things that others didn't. Those within the community who really knew what Jesus came to do, they knew he had a huge demonstration that he had to fulfill, and he had been trained for it his whole lifetime. They knew that it was sort of risky, and they knew that the practices that they had taught would allow the resurrection to occur, that they had prepared the consciousness and the body in order for those things to happen with him. He had done um, practices, for example, being in sepulchres for days on end, working on the energy, being able to slow down the bodily processes, and then when the time came to be able to come out from them again fully well. So um, this community, they knew that what was coming was going to be painful for Jesus and for their community, and yet their love of humanity made them willing for it to be done, willing to raise the vibrational grid of humanity. See, it's sort of like the banister guy who broke the record for the mile, and then after that, other people started doing it. Jesus's purpose here was actually to come to planet Earth to raise the the possibilities of what the rest of us who followed, were able to do on a spiritual consciousness, energetic form. And so this required some very extensive practices on his part, and required a lot of dedication and devotion. So, what we've been describing is this holistic community. And as was mentioned before with Reverend Rainbow, that the holistic simply means the sum is greater, that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The whole of that community, what it was here to do, its purpose was greater than just the individual people within that community. And if we're in a community that we want to flourish as a whole, that perhaps we can adopt some of the tools, some of the uh, means of focus that they had. And so I did bring some tools with me today for our own blessed community, as Thomas Kelly called it. So the acronym of the day is PDF. We know that, like when you do a Word document and you set it, you set it down and say, okay, this is it. Then you can make a PDF of it. And so the PDF here is going to be how we're going to, like have a plan there for the blessed community and things we're going to pay attention to. The P stands for purpose. Um, like I mentioned, the Essenes, they had that singular focus. They were about raising consciousness, about enlightenment, about ascension, dissension practices. They were all about that, up-leveling the grid of humanity. So this morning, we get to look at our lives and we get to decide, what is my purpose? Do I individually and as a community, what is my life about? What are we all about? Are we putting our attention on our survival needs most of the time? Of course, we have to survive, but is that where our focus is going? Is that where our attention is going? Is that where our minds are going? Um, are we just so intent on discovering and uncovering the magnificence that we are in the first place? Are we here to support others in community? Are we here to serve the world, to uplevel our own beingness so that others can be uplifted as well? That is really the best thing that we can do for humanity is to uplevel our own consciousness, our own um, energy level. Because when we do that, the effect on humanity is exponential. It's not one for one, it's one for many. And that has a much greater impact than anything else that we could do. So, do we have that as part of our purpose as well? Do we have this purpose of upleveling? So, what is our life about? That's the P. Now, the D in PDF stands for devotion. Devotion. The Essenes, the practice that they had of love and genuine care for each other and the larger world, it just wasn't something they thought about from time to time. They were devoted to it. It was in their fabric. It underlied all that they did. It was in their waking and their falling asleep and in all of the times in between. Can we be devoted like that? Um, this might be a wonderful impetus, this question, am I devoted to, but it might be a wonderful time for us to become acquainted with the spirit within, that energetic vibration that's within us. Throughout the day, we could pop in and ask, does my inner realm reflect love? Does it reflect joy that I say I'm devoted to? Or am I all tight and tense with stress, worrying about my livelihood or what I'm going to say or what someone else is going to say? Or can I get a picture of the whole and settle back into that awareness of the good in all? Or am I busy being resistant to what is, being resistant to things so that I'm not even open to looking at them? Does love exude through me throughout the day? In this situation, in this person, in this event, in this place, can I say, this too, I love? And this too, it doesn't look like it, but I do love it. And this too, I love, and allow ourselves to wash the feeling of love over the situation. Are we devoted to that? We can be. That's the D. The F in PDF stands for foundation. Like I mentioned, the foundation of the community of Essenes was very, very strong. It was a common foundation. And so we want to be able to have that strong foundation that we can stand on. So, do we mentally say and believe that we're all one, that God presence is all there is? And also, do we feel that way? Does our mental chatter follow that? Do we acknowledge God in all things in our lives? This is the presence, and that's the presence, and that's the presence. Everywhere I look, it's the presence. Everyone I see, everyone without exception, that's the presence. Can we stand on that foundation of knowing that there is only this one essence and it underlies all, and it is the presence, that creative element of good and grace and love? Can I stand on that foundation? Can I lose all judgment of myself and others and know that any resistance is only going to hold me back into the unreality of this 3D world? This 3D world, yes, it's here, but it's only so small of a part of who we are. Are we going to allow ourselves to be in that larger essence of life, knowing the presence is all there is and that we're it? Foundation, that's the F. So, the invitation this morning, on this Easter morning, as we look at this blessed community, the blessed community that raised Jesus and Mary Magdalene and those beautiful souls back then, and look at our community today, our blessed Austin Center for Spiritual Living. Do we have that common purpose and common foundation? Are we devoted to it, devoted to not only it, but to the humanity as a whole, devoted to devoting our lives to that? It's quite the invitation. I'm going to quote again from Thomas Kelly from his book, A Testament of Devotion. The final grounds of holy fellowship are in God. Lives immersed and drowned in God are drowned in love, and know one another in Him, and know one another in love. God is the medium, the matrix, the focus, the solvent. It is as if every soul had a final base, and that final base of every soul is one single holy ground shared by all. So let's just move into our time of treatment. As we take a deep breath deep in the belly, we expand our awareness to recognize that the presence truly is all that there is, that there is nothing outside of it, and that this presence is always creating more good, creating higher, elevated means of being and ways of being. And that this element of creation is how each of us was created, out of that desire of this presence to know itself more fully. And so we are our own individuation of that presence. And each of us here creates out of a desire to know ourselves more fully as well. We are indeed creative beings. Our word has power. Our intention has power. And so this morning, on this Easter day, each of us, each of us is already the enlightened one who has come to the planet to expose that, to share that. And so we each hold fast to the vibration of love, to the devotion in our hearts, knowing that upliftment is sure to be ours. It's our destiny. It is our destiny to be fulfilled in this way. We reaffirm our love of each other. We reaffirm our support of each other. We stand on that firm foundation that says this community is up-leveling humanity. As I speak these words, I am aware that they are true already. For there is nothing that has been spoken that is not already come to pass. It's simply a recognition of it is what we aspire to and what we devote ourselves to. So in this awareness of the wholeness, the holiness, the lovingness of all creation and of each other, I release this into that beautiful, beautiful law of grace. And so it is. Amen.